Hello and welcome back to the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. I am your host, Michael Stamatinos. And if you are new to us, man, we're just really pumped and excited to have you here because we're having some incredible conversations with real leaders that are painstakingly shaping and reshaping the future of healthcare. And we're pretty passionate about a few different things. We're passionate about healthcare innovation, adoption. We're passionate around leadership and access. And if it's your first time tuning in, let me just take a quick step back and tell you what we're actually doing here. So our focus is bringing real stories of innovation to life, not just the wins. We're talking about some of the learnings, and the highlight is talking to real people that are actually making stuff happen, and giving them the space and the platform to share their stories with our community, which we have an amazing community, ultimately spreading that to the rest of the world. So if you haven't checked out any of the historical interviews that we've done, wherever you are, make sure you hit the subscribe button now. Whatever else you need to do, make sure that those interviews go right into your inbox. So in our field, things are constantly evolving. Things are changing, things are moving quickly, and it's crucial to have leaders that can envision a future differently and embrace innovation and address pressing challenges. And one of those areas that's been pretty challenging, at least for the last since I can remember, is really around workforce and performance management. So our next guest, so excited about this. Our next guest is really a visionary leader that's transforming performance management. Kate O'Neill is a co-founder and CEO of Opry. So at Opry, she's really on a transformative mission to redefine performance management. So Kate's got an amazing track record. She's working on changing how companies think about making their teams stronger, healthier, ultimately performing better. And Kate's way of leading is it's really all about looking to the future, and it's understanding how to make the team perform at its best and what are those ingredients that need to go into that recipe for consistency over time. So today, my objective is to pull out Kate's story, share it with you, her journey, and maybe pull out maybe some insights into what is driving some of this innovation around workforce and what she's leading the team at Opry to do and how they're transforming this space. And it's kind of awesome. So, Kate, it's great to see you. Welcome to the show. What's up?
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. This is really cool to be part of, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity. This is so cool that you're doing this. It's so needed.
Definitely is. Definitely is. So, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about sort of what to ask you. But the first thing that comes to my mind is kind of take us back to your childhood, like early experiences. What shaped your ambition? And was there like a specific aha moment when you first realized that you wanted to lead a company?
Interesting. I don't know, or I don't think so. The thing that immediately popped into my mind in terms of the moment I knew was probably the moment I didn't know, which was when I was 18 years old. I was headed into my senior year of high school. I ended up staying back a year, long story. We can get into that. And my parents sat me down, and I was blessed enough to have them pay for most of my college, which was amazing. As did my brother. And they said to us, my parents said to us, you each get $100,000, which is like an unbelievable amount of money. But when we were going to school at the time, it still wasn't enough to cover all of college, which is
Yeah,
a whole other story.
it's way more now.
Yeah, it's way more now. And so they said, you can go to college, you can get married and have a wedding. They didn't think it was fair that daughters got the weddings and the sons didn't. So that this was like the thing. They would have given 100 grand to my brother to go have a big wedding instead of college, I guess.
Yeah.
Probably not, but. And then the last thing was you could start a business. And my brother was older than me, and he went to college. He was very much a college person. School was his thing. School was not as much that it wasn't as much my thing, which I think is a little bit different in healthcare. When you talk to healthcare folks, they were very good at school. Um, and so my parents really tried to have me um, do that to go into entrepreneurship and it because they thought that that would be a good route for me and I was like, what are you talking about? No, like I can't do that. I have to go to college and be normal. And so sometimes in the dark of the night I think to myself when I'm up and stressed about whatever it is about running this business, I think to myself, am I just years behind where I would have been if I had taken the path that my parents thought I should take?
Hmm. So when we talk about the genesis of Opry, when you hear about things about like, hey, people were in a garage or someone had this idea to sketch it on the back of a post-it note, in their office. And eventually that a tiny little idea turned into this large scale operation. I mean, walk us through the early days. Was it something on a post-it note? I mean, how did you sort of translate this concept, this idea into like a viable roadmap?
Yeah, so there's sort of two things coming together at once. One was my co-founders and I were working at another company called Lean Kit. Lean Kit was not healthcare specific, but we had a lot of healthcare customers. Humana, for instance, all their claims agents used our software to actually respond to claims faster. And the promise of that software was to deliver work faster. And that's great, right? How can it help you deliver work
Yeah.
faster? It's process management software, it's boring, whatever. But what we realized, right, when we were doing very large scale implementations of the software, we realized that the biggest thing that impacted a team's ability to get work done was the manager. The biggest variable, we were measuring all the things you could possibly measure. Our software was the most customizable. And at the end of the day, we couldn't really predict the flow of work without understanding more about the manager. And so that's kind of where we saw the opportunity for Opry. So that was the first part of it. And then the second part of it was in that job, I was promoted to run marketing. So it was the first time I was managing managers. It was the first time I was promoted above my peers. It was the first time I was in the executive team, first time reported to a CEO. All these management firsts that I now realize were actually, a big deal. And thankfully
Yeah.
my manager, my boss, my CEO at the time was like, we're going to get you management training. We're going to get you an executive coach. And that was life-changing experience for me. And I felt like we should make that accessible to everyone.
What's interesting is that, well, a couple things. Number one, great story, great sort of ascend as you're climbing up the ladder. Were there were there mentors along the way, like some key figures that helped kind of guide you, that saw that talent in you? Can you maybe talk about, maybe give them a little bit of a shout
Yeah,
out? Maybe it was a
shout
coach,
outs
maybe
to
it was a
them.
teacher.
I was
Obviously, it
gonna
sounds like your parents were. It sounds like your parents were important as well, outside of your parents, of course.
Yeah. Um, well, I think we're going way back now. I am dyslexic, so I that was like not a thing when I was little. I'm 40, almost 40 now, and it just was not something people really understood very well. And so I
Yeah,
remember it was like very clear. I'm sitting, it's the very first time that you're like in first grade, you're broken up into little reading groups to read aloud, right, for your first time. And I so clearly remember getting put into this group, and I thankfully started to go last. And there is a child in our class that has Down syndrome, and he could read better than me. And I
mm,
thought to myself, oh my gosh, like I'm not a real human. Like I can't do this. And not to say like, you realize like I have this big flaw that I can't tell anyone about. I gotta figure out how to pretend to do this thing that everyone's doing. And so my teacher understood and knew the resources worked with my parents to like figure out how to help me along. And so that was like,
Who's that
you know,
teacher?
Mrs. Brooks.
Is
She's
Mrs. Brooks still around?
Brooks. I got so I have a little cousin who's 12 years younger than me, and I went to her high school graduation, so it's like the same school district, and I saw Mrs. Brooks then, but that was probably 10 years ago now, so I got to check it out.
You ever told her? Like, have you ever told her what she's
Oh
done for you?
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
she
we
knows.
talked.
She knows. Okay.
Oh, she
Okay, cool,
knows. Yeah,
cool.
she
That's great. That's great.
And then I
Well, I
would
mean,
say like athletic coaches, mostly Mr. Patrick in high school was like just from a leadership perspective, really helped me to understand how important leadership is. So those are early days. How about you? I'm curious who your mentors, coaches, all that. If you had to
man,
pick one.
I've had some, I'd say the biggest influence that is still their lessons carry and permeate throughout my life outside of my parents. Soccer coach, Coach Rich. He taught us lessons. He was like the Mr. Miyagi. He was doing things to us that we didn't even realize he was doing to us until after.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Be first, be on time, certain things. Like work hard. These principles that regardless of how time changes, they are timeless. And they still work even in this environment. So
Hmm.
that I've read this before where they said that a coach in 1 week can impact more people than someone can in their entire life. In 1 week,
Wow.
coach.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, and you were athletic and you had coaches, and you get into this corporate environment, you become this corporate athlete, and yet there's very little coaching. So talk about accessibility. Talk about the thought process behind creating greater levels of access. How did you define performance management before you started Opry? What does that
Mm.
definition look like today?
Yeah, good question. I think that performance, so I suffer from perfectionism, or at least I used to. I guess I still do. I think it's a lifetime affliction. And that's probably how I thought about
You're a
performance, right?
recovering perfectionist.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Hi, Kate.
that is that's how I used to think about performance. If it's not perfect, it's shit, excuse my language. Right? It's not good enough. And I think there is something to that mentality that is good in the sense that you have strong grit, you have strong commitment, you want to keep getting better. But until I actually worked at our last company, which was very into the principles of that like software where Humana was using it and all that good stuff, the principles of that company are based on Kanban. I don't know if your audience will be familiar with this, but it's
Would you mind
lean.
sharing?
What's that?
Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, yeah,
Some
no,
tips
not
on
at
that?
all. It's basically the Japanese car market. That's how the Japanese car market crushed the American car market, was they figured out just-in-time manufacturing.
Yeah,
Um, the example I like to use is like Ford would buy, 1 billion bolts because they could get the best deal on the per bolt cost if they bought 1 billion of them. But they could only
right,
buy 100,000 chassis. And so your constraint is the 100,000 chassis. You can only produce 100,000 cars because you only have 100,000 chassis. And so everything else would kind of flow from the constraint. And so when you think about that from a performance standpoint, what are your constraints, right? What is your capacity? And then one other really core tenet of lean manufacturing is continuous improvement. There's two actually, and I'll get into this. One is continuous improvement, and one is respect for people. So on the continuous improvement side, when you look at the actual math of performance, it is so much higher performing to get 1% better every day, to start with something terrible. and
Right.
make it 1% better than continuously try to make something that's 100% perfect. Literally it doesn't math. The math don't math on that. And so it
Yeah.
reshapes the way you think about performance.
Mm.
Um, and and so yeah, continuous improvement from working at that job has become a core value of me personally. To It's not that I accept where I am today, or like that's it, that's all I want, but I accept where I am today in terms of I'm going to make it a 1% better today, and then I'm going to make it 1% better tomorrow. And you get to where you want to go, right? The vision that you want to create by thinking about that
It
or have
compounds over time. So it's like, so my personal view of innovation is about being able to add value to many and incrementally improving over a long stretch of time. Been my life story, right? Which is like, didn't start out with a finished product. You just continuously get better, and that compounds over a stretch of time. And as you add up those little wins, when I ask you, give me some little wins, it's it's just the remembering of these incremental improvements. That's just my way of humanizing it in the day to day. Hey man, give me some little wins.
that's it.
So keep going, keep going.
Yeah, so the other core tenet is respect for people in manufacturing. That was, child safety, child labor laws, safety requirements, right? That sort of thing. We were working and we still do work on what does that mean for knowledge work? Um, I think that actually healthcare has a really unique take on this, which is like you have, folks that are you know, you've got physical things that have to be safe about the environment, or they
Right.
have to be, there's certain standards that you have to meet. But there also is the psychological part of it that is really also important for doing high quality work. And so that's the part of performance, right? It's the inputs. What is the mindset we need? What are the resources we need? Who are the people, right? How do they operate? What can they bring to the table? How do we put them in the best seats to win and to achieve and to get continuously better over time? So that sort of respect for people is the other core tenet of, how we perform. Performance management, the way it's been done, it starts with the organization and its goals and how what it needs to achieve, and says, okay, how do we create bits of people that can achieve this thing? And it's literally designed to make everyone's job and the way that they contribute to that job exactly the same, rather than looking at, okay, I use like phone support as a really good example, or customer support.
Right.
You've got customer support. Someone might be really good on the phone, but terrible on chat because they don't type fast or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And you might have someone else who's terrible on the phone, but is whiz on the computer. Well, why are we making those people have both sets of skills? Let's put one on the phone and put one on chat. That's just like, that just makes sense. But most organizations don't do that. They create a standard for the skills necessary, and they try to make the people fit the boxes of performance that then lead up to this big organizational thing. And we believe the exact opposite is how you create healthy, high performing companies, is to say, here's the challenge. Who are these groups of people that can bring unique perspectives to the table to solve these things, to achieve these things, to create these opportunities, to realize these opportunities? And that's how we win. It's the uniqueness of the workforce that actually creates the performance, and performance management as it's traditionally been done, which by the way is really performance reviews, that whole cycle, right?
Yeah, you sit down once a year, but the truth of the matter is like you only sit down once. Like, don't you want to know how you're doing?
Why didn't you tell me 11 months ago I wasn't doing a good job? You know?
Ideally, good managers would. But if there's one thing that I've seen, it's sometimes you get high performers, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, this person's performing really well. Let's just put them in a management role. Does that necessarily mean that they'll be a good manager?
No. In fact, I have this theory. I'm really curious to get your take on it.
Yeah.
Let's say you're an individual contributor, right? And when you're an individual contributor and you're the best individual contributor on the team, you're probably the best at solving problems for your manager, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the and then so that person gets promoted into management because they were the best at solving problems. And I think that that is what is the block of why an individual contributor might not be naturally the best selection for management because when people who are really good at problem solving, like think of the best problem solvers you know. I think it's rare, like people like that look at the world and they see problems. They're really good at seeing problems. And people are not problems. But when you have that view of the world, because that's how you got ahead by being the best at solving problems for your manager. You can't then rise into a management position and say, all these people are problems, right? That you can't look at the world that way. Do you think that
Yeah.
that's fair?
Well, first off, you have to realize that when you're managing someone, like you're not managing yourself. You're not you. So if you're the CEO of the company, clearly your level of care, of passion is going to exceed someone that is an individual contributor. And to expect, which sometimes inadvertently can convert into an entitlement, can literally kill the spirit of a company. To expect that is it's not healthy.
Mm-mm. I agree.
So when you're talking about building tools, how much of what you build is actually you building for yourself, for Opry to use, to leverage, and then do you bring that out to your clients? I'm just very curious because if you're a performance management solution, then it's likely in the DNA of Opry, unless I'm totally off base. But
No. Look, I think that there's something to this idea that if it's true at the top, it's true throughout. Like, if this is the way that I think about management, then it's obviously going to bleed into the product. Like, so I think there's some of that. I really, really try. I think the and my co-founder is so good at this, where like removing ourselves, what is the customer saying? What is the customer's problem? What are the potential solutions to solve that problem? How can we test these solutions in a small way to solve that problem, right? We're getting back into problem solving, but good product development, you're solving people's problems. It's as one of our advisors says, it's rats, not dents, right? So if you've got a rat in your house, what's the first thing you're gonna do?
either put up a trap or call an exterminator.
That's right. If you get into a fender bender, or if you bump a pole with your car, how long is it gonna take you to get that dent fixed?
Depends. If you're OCD, you're it's
Most most people are not like the first thing they're doing is not like I gotta get the car in to get the dent fixed.
yeah.
It's not like a
Just
rat.
yeah.
It's a
Yeah, I
dent.
mean, you know what happened. You know what happens. It's not a bleeding neck thing. Unless the car is like the bumper's falling off. Oh God, I gotta
Yeah,
do this now. I gotta take care of it. It's like a whole 6 week ordeal. I get it.
yeah.
Uh, with you.
So
So
that's
the
the yeah.
interesting. But then it seems as though like if you come to a crossroads, you gotta make some pivots. I mean, how do you recognize the need for a change? What steps do you and the team sort of ensure that the pivot is it's successful and like aligned with what you're supposed to be doing is, from like a core vision standpoint.
Well, we've pivoted twice. Well, we've been three different versions of this company. And I think part of it is failure. It's recognizing failure. I really think that the best leaders, the most successful entrepreneurs, the people who are out there doing it, they're able to recognize when something just isn't working. and they can
Mm,
see it, they can feel it. That ugh, it's keeping me up at night and I can't really quite put my finger on it. You got to be able to name that and move on. And sometimes that works where it's a pivot and okay, that makes sense because we're working so closely. We're out there talking to so many customers. We're having so many conversations where we realize like, ah, we built a dent fixer, not an exterminator. And so how do the very first step is to recognize the failure. You gotta accept it. There's just I don't know, no other way around it. You can't avoid it. And I think that's one thing I think is a core leadership tenet that my coach taught me is you can't avoid stuff. It just hurts you and hurts everyone else to avoid things. And
yeah,
so, yeah, you got to face it. And you kind of get addicted to that too. Like when you stop avoiding the things in your life that are hard or that you don't want to deal with or that are nagging but like not really like you could put it off when you stop doing that and you're like no, I'm just gonna get through this stuff. uh you have a richer life and you have a better performing team, you got better relationships, all that. What do you
yeah.
think?
I've been thinking about how we're both footballers, and you mentioned about you're a recovering perfectionist. I'm just being honest here.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm thinking about, my position that I played, your position you played, which you're a goalkeeper. So you're the last line of defense, and then one wrong move literally can cost you the match. How do you sort of channel that same mentality into executive decision making at Opry? Because there are moments I can imagine where you must feel the same sort of high stakes rush that you would feel on the pitch.
Yeah, sure. um Hey, yeah, it's interesting. I think I haven't, I'm still on this journey, I think.
We
My
all
high,
are.
what's that? We all
We
are?
all
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good. The high stakes piece is when I'm like serving my stakeholder. So, when I was a VP of marketing, it was mostly the customer, right? Are we getting good feedback from potential customers? Are we driving pipeline for the business? And then basically like what does the CEO and the board say? Are we meeting their expectations? As a CEO, I find it harder because there are so many more stakeholders. We got our investors, we got our customers, we have our employees. Like there's all these audiences that we need. So when I'm like about to get on a customer call, right, a demo or something, I feel the sense of excitement and energy. But I think the difference is, whereas like a game or you practice all week to play your game at the end of the week, the you have to like incorporate practice into the actual performance. So like every call, I'm a big um like science person in the sense of doing a actual test, right? Like how can we test something? So I might take a different approach on one demo versus another to see how that resonates. I'm going to record those things so I can go back later and play it back like game tape to see, how did I do? So I think that there isn't necessarily a game, that I'm preparing for, all week, other than maybe board meetings. I guess I do a lot of preparing for that. But like, you know what I mean? It's you have to practice while you're performing kind of thing. And I think the 1% mindset really helps with that, where, you know, yeah, you're creating the practice even in the high stakes environment. Because you just have to. You can't be afraid to fail. You got to put yourself out there. It's going to be awkward, and you're just going to do it, and you get better next time.
Any
Um,
any any flaps? Any any flaps that are too embarrassing to share that you want
oh
to
man,
share?
so many. Let me think. Um,
I'm just trying to
God,
give people a real picture of like what it's like, right? Because everyone can show their highlight reel, but like give me the real stuff.
give me the failures. Um, yeah, what are some good failures?
I mean,
Well,
it's feedback. When things don't go well, I mean, it's feedback. And you're like, okay, I'm not
that's
gonna do
it.
that
Like
again.
I've shaped it so much into my mind that I like. it has become such a valuable thing that I'm not embarrassed by it anymore because it just was what it was. I learned. The times I'm really embarrassed is when I'm underprepared. That like that's what kills me. Ugh. If I don't prepare enough or life gets in the way or those things happen occasionally. Those are the ones that keep me up at night. I would say like big big failures, the two pivots we made. So we started out as like a meetings app, um, analytics for your meetings, and people basically said like you're solving the wrong problem for me. It's that I don't know how effective these meetings are. Not that like yeah, I'm in a lot of meetings, but like which meetings don't I go to anymore? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. So we realized like, okay, analytics in your meetings is like okay, but the real, rat, not dent, is helping people to understand what is an effective meeting. How effective was that meeting? Should we continue having this meeting, investing this time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So yeah, I mean, we raised millions of dollars on that idea and it failed. And it was a big risk and uh, it sucked, but it also led us where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, let's maybe talk about that sort of resilience. Um, any rituals in terms of mental preparation techniques? Is there anything you've embedded into this solution that helps with that level of resilience that people can use to stay sharp, to stay focused, that you can
Yeah.
translate to them in a meaningful, bite-sized way?
Yeah, absolutely. One, Opry wise, I can give you lots of them like outside of Opry, but inside of Opry, there's a couple things. One is, we forget because the traditional performance management, like how do I get promoted? How do I get a raise? Like all these I questions that we have that are fair questions, but we forget that it's actually we need to make this team a high performance team and that everyone on the team contributes to that environment. We need if we want to live in this environment, we want work to be a certain way, we make it so. It's not 100% on the manager, it's not 100% on the culture, right? Us as employees, individual contributors, what have you, contribute to creating the environment they want to work in. And so that's the that's the unlock I think that Opry really helps with is you actually see what is your impact on team dynamics? What's your impact on the team goals? How can you get specific coaching about how you could improve the team dynamic based on who you are and what might be natural and comfortable for you and what might be a stretch and, something that might be a little bit harder for you versus someone else on the team. So that's one way. Another way, there that Opry helps you with is something called team health. We're actually analyzing the health of the team, and there's actual science to understand what is always true of healthy, high-performing teams. It is not whether you're co-located, remote, or hybrid. It is not tenure of working together. It is not age. It's not subject matter. It's not like a group of lawyers are not higher performing than a lawyer, a doctor, and a nurse together, right? Like you don't even have to have the same functional area of expertise. Like none of that has statistically significant impact on team performance. What does have statistically significant impact is psychological safety and trust, active
Yes.
accountability, commitment to the team and ourselves and each other, right? The ability to focus on achieving goals together, like the actual focus, not necessarily the achievement, but the focus itself. And there's a couple other things, but Opry actually analyzes those things to help us understand where are we on that so that we can help work on the culture of the team that we're never really sure has an impact. Right now, you can be sure these rituals are important. So that's one way. For me personally, oh man, I got so many things. Sleep is so super important. Exercise is super important. I think for me, I can't. My brain doesn't focus without exercise. Like I can literally feel my performance slipping if I don't get a workout in, or some like thing that raises your heart rate. And then yeah, there's a bunch of other things. I won't I'm curious what you do to perform well every day. What is your tip?
All right. So morning quiet time, like very important. It's like, are you a morning person? You're an evening person? I go to sleep at like 9 p.m. Complete, very boring.
Yep.
9, 9:30, 10. Hey, if we're really, if it's getting wild, 10 o'clock. Wow. Uh,
Party animal.
yeah, the morning ritual is really important. I like to get up really early. I do get a workout in, although it's not like an intensive CrossFit. Oh my gosh, it's just to get moving. I've got 3 kids, so it's hard. So I jam it in, and then just like space for thinking, for being creative. My best hours for being creative are in the hours of like 5 to 7 a.m. Like that's
Amazing.
when I'm most peak. What I can tell you about culture, you mentioned something that piqued my interest around culture. And just remembering working with a number of different clinics is you could walk into a clinic and energetically feel whether that clinic had good culture. You could just sense it. And the clinics had great culture because, sometimes there's companies that are sort of decentralized and each clinic can take on its own culture. And that is really contingent upon the leader. How good of a leader are they? And do they create a space where you feel valued and like you can give your best? And I just always remembered the ones that had amazing culture. They always crushed their metrics. Never had any issues on budget. Never went in and talked about budget stuff. Hey, what are you looking to grow? What are you looking to do here? How can we support? And others where you just walked in and you're like, oof, yeah, something off here. What's
What do you think?
great is now you're saying that you can measure that and how can you incrementally change it? I think it has to do with how you communicate with people. If you're someone that is very concrete, if you're like an engineer and you speak very subjective, touchy-feely, they're not going to get it. They need
Yeah.
data, they need stats, they need information. Here's what's backing it up versus someone who can kind of be very aligned with the mission, the vision, and you can connect with them emotionally and they'll run through a wall for you. I think that's, in football, we talk about that, that's like man management skills. Like you're not just going to say everyone does it this way. There's some players that do really well under Jose Mourinho because they understand his style, and others that they just can't handle his level of criticism and critique. It,
Yeah.
they just don't. I'm curious because in soccer, there's fans, media, and they're pretty quick to criticize people. And you being a goalkeeper, if a goal is conceded, as CEO, do you feel like there's a similar spotlight? Like, how do you handle scrutiny that comes along with being like the buck stops with you for your company? How do you
Yeah.
handle that?
Not well. No. It is hard. It is the like level of scrutiny gets higher and higher, I think. But a lot of it is also mental. It's like living up here, what I think people think, and that is the doom spiral of badness. If there's one thing I could say that it took me a long time to learn is like you got to get other people out of your head. It doesn't help. If you've got a great coach that can help you walk through why you're feeling that way, right? That's
Or a
gold.
therapist. By the way, we had a great, depending on when this goes out, we had an awesome one with Joanne Chastman, who was kind of walking through about thoughts translating to feelings, and yeah, good stuff. Keep going.
So yeah, that's it. I think there's been a couple tools. One is naming or welcoming my feelings in without judgment. So, as a recovering perfectionist, even in my own brain, if I have a thought or a feeling that I don't like, I judge myself for it, which is silly and dumb. And how does that help? How does that help me live, and perform to the core values that I have? It doesn't, right? So, you have to have this mental practice of like inviting your feeling in without judgment so that you can process it and move on. So that's one thing I think that's really helpful is to like get those people out of my head, stop feeling or stop like judging myself in my own feelings, like letting them happen is sort of like helpful rather than being in constant denial of them, I guess. And
Look, these are
then
little things that are happening within the team dynamic that are below the surface of the water that are impacting team performance.
Mhm.
And if I'm putting all the dots correctly, sounds like what you're saying is that you could bring those surface level and address them
That's right.
in real time.
Yeah. Yeah. When we are in your meetings, right, we are analyzing the communication so clearly or so word by word. And we're not just doing it from a what is the topics being talked about here? We're actually analyzing it for clarity. And on top of that, we're analyzing it for clarity based on how we understand different types of people consume information. I read different than everyone, right? Everyone else consumes content, consumes conversations differently. They listen differently. And so, how can we help people understand when they're communicating clearly? And how can we help someone else listen better for what someone of a different communication style might have said? And so you're right. That's absolutely the unlock because what happens when we miscommunicate, like pretty much everything comes down to a miscommunication. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're nonverbal. Sometimes
Mhm.
they're, you know, patterns over time, right? AI is so incredibly good. And we've only just scratched the surface still, but it is so incredibly good at helping to identify those communication patterns and then being able to coach around them. And it's better than the human brain can, honestly. So why not use a tool like that to help guide and coach ourselves as individuals and then the group as a whole?
Pretty amazing. Can we analyze this conversation? Can we analyze it? And
We can if you're
show,
recording it.
okay.
Yeah. 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 I'm gonna have to get you to sign
As a
up
matter of
and
fact, yeah.
do a little assessment. Take you like
All
10
right,
minutes, but
all right, so how do people like give us a little commercial, like a snapshot of how people can learn more about Opry and the work that you and your team are doing? Because look, it's really important work. As much as we want to talk about how things have gone remote or in person, human beings are human beings. We have thoughts, feelings, emotions. That's not going to change. And if we're going to try to be creating dynamic environments where people are not only just surviving and thriving, we have to get better at this. Like we're not just going to be working solo forever. Like we got to get this working. So tell us a little bit about where we can follow you and the team and what you guys are doing.
yeah, well, certainly follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably the place that you'll get the most like candid, open. We talk about the failures there. We talk about our use of our own product. It's very it's a little bit meta, but you get the idea of what we're talking about when, you see the little demo videos and that sort of thing. Getopry.com. Opry is a little nod to Nashville, but it actually stands for how we communicate. So we have like the engineer you said, right? We have folks that communicate really operationally focused and people who communicate really relationally focused. So OP, operations, RE, relationships, right? We both have we all have those both sides of our brain, but we tilt one way or the other. And so Opry helps you to identify like a very operationally focused engineer can communicate with a very relationally focused customer success person, right? And we can help those two types of people have the most crazy good performing relationship together because, and this is the other thing we found out is when we work together, most of the time we will say an operationally focused person will be able to communicate and build trust faster with other operationally focused people, right? We go
Right.
to
Yeah.
like ourselves. However, we do higher quality work. The team produces better work and performs better when we have both on the team. So while it is harder to communicate and build trust with people who aren't like us, it is actually more fruitful from a performance standpoint.
Wow. Folks, if you're listening into this and you're like digging this, I'm digging this, great stuff. Please, let us know what you think.
Love to
Before we
hear it.
wrap up, Kate, this is just a completely random question that I was not anticipating asking, but just going to ask
I
it
like
anyway. You're in a 4-on-4 tournament, okay?
it. Okay.
You're obviously in goal. Who are the three players? You can pick any players. Who are the three players that are must-haves on your squad?
Mm. I'm not big into the like famous players, so I'm gonna
It's
go with
great.
people that like I used to play with. God, it's so hard. I don't know. Ugh. Well,
Hey, listen,
tell you this.
it's
I'll tell you
okay.
this. You know what? This is not answering your question, but it's kind of funny. My best friend and I used to go out when I was in college. I looked a little like Brandy Chastain, like a little bit,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. I see that. I see that.
yeah,
Yeah, good
I
stuff.
would we would go out and I we would convince people that I was Brandy Chastain. And people like really believed it. And it was
Took pictures and everything. That's great.
yeah. Yeah. It was before like Facebook and like before, you could Google her and be like, this is, we didn't have phones in our
Yeah,
pocket. We were like had our like digital camera out. And yeah, people believed it. So I'd have to pick her on my team because that would just be a full circle moment. What about you?
tremendous, tremendous. Um, I'm my buddy Chris Musinski, one of the best soccer players I've ever played with ever. Just incredible player, finesse, skills, great touch. But then if I had to take any other player like of all time, I'd probably take like a Zinedine Zidane. He is probably one of the greatest footballers I've ever. He's the best footballer I've ever seen play live in my life. Um, and then you gotta get like a striker. Probably Lionel Messi. Who wouldn't take him? He's greatest,
Yeah.
probably arguably the greatest player of all time. So Chris, Zizou, Messi, me. I mean, whatever. I'll stay. I'll at that point, like I'll do whatever. I'll be the goalie. I have no.
I
I
mean,
used to play goalie back in the day. I listen. Honestly, I probably wouldn't even pick myself. I probably wouldn't even pick myself. I'd
and
just
you
be
gotta
like,
have
I'd
that
be out.
experience. You gotta get on the
Yeah,
field with those people
yeah,
because
yeah,
that's pretty amazing. Does Chicago have a team? I don't even know this.
yeah. Chicago Fire does have a team.
Okay, there you go.
And the former U.S. men's national team coach, Greg Berhalter, is the coach. So I think we'll be seeing a nice uptick in wins this season. But anyhow, for those that have joined in, if you've enjoyed this jam session, this training session, whatever you want to call it, this conversation, if you found value in it, please, would you mind sharing it on social, letting us know what stood out to you? Um, and if Kate or anyone on their team you think that you would be willing to chat with them, reach out to them. All
Please
right.
do.
So until the next one, see you soon.